Good evening and welcome to another episode of non-Asatru. And the episode today is conducted in English, as you might have noticed already. Our guest today is Mr. Stephen McNallen, so warm greetings to you, sir.
Welcome.
And warm greetings to you. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be talking with you today.
It's definitely our pleasure and honor. And my co-host today is Sigtyr, who was also on the previous episode. So welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you. And Mr. McNallen, could you begin our episode by introducing yourself to our audience? Everyone that listens to this episode might not have heard of you before.
Well, the only reason anyone might possibly have heard of me is because of my work in Asatru. Other than that, I'm a pretty ordinary guy. But many years ago, when I was, in my early 20s, I discovered the old gods and goddesses of the North. And I immediately knew this is where my heart was. And all of the religion that I'd been raised in went out the window, and the one-eyed god, Odin, became the person or the god, the being that I identified with and wished to serve. And that's my sole claim to fame.
Mm. And you became interested in pagan religions and Asatru in the late 60s, as far as I could research?
Yes.
So all this paganism and Asatru and the original religions of Europe, is that something that started, did people become interested in these things? Was it like connected to the whole hippie movement and the cultural revolution of the late 60s?
No, not at all. It was a very separate thing. And in my mind, I think it was almost a counter-revolution to their proposed revolution. I was always very conservative in my political beliefs. I was a young man training to go into military service. I wanted to be an army officer at that point in time. I wanted to join special forces and go and do bad things to communists. And I still think that's a good idea. But at 72, I'm not likely to be doing a lot of that. And so I already had sort of that conservative way of looking at the world. Not wanting to destroy the current system. Certainly, there are problems with the modern system, but I did not want to see the particular changes to the radical left that they wish to impose. I was very much opposed to them on campus and was always getting in a little bit of trouble for that, but that's okay. So it was very different from the so-called 60s revolution. But it was a necessary counterbalance, I think.
Mm. Okay, so when you became involved with paganism, essentially, was there a large pagan scene, or was there many pagan groups around at that time, or did you kind of have to invent your own movement, in a sense?
Well, there were a lot of people that called themselves pagans, but that became just sort of a very broad term, implying what today people like us would think of as degeneracy, and do your own thing, and peace, love, good vibes, and all of that kind of stuff. It was not a very serious movement. There were some people that were genuine pagans, but almost 100% of them were not following our way. They were following maybe some very general kind of paganism, a god and goddess kind of thing, the earth mother and the sky father thing. But it was very matriarchal in character. It was, much more socially liberal and so forth than, say, I was. So it was a very different thing. And really, I did not know the word Asatru then. I just knew that the way of the old Nordic folk was the way that I chose to follow.
the word Asatru, it was coined by the Icelandic, wasn't it?
Yes.
So you started Asatru Folk Assembly. You have started some things before. There was some forerunners to that.
Oh yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Oh yes. I was so young, and I was so naive in so many ways, and the world was so simple when you're 21 or whatever I was. I wasn't even 21 at that point, I guess. Maybe just barely. Yeah, I was. But at first it was just me. I was the only one. And I would talk about this to my friends, and I found, a number of my friends who kind of liked it. They sort of went along with it. But eventually, I started something called the Viking Brotherhood. And today, I realize that is really a very narrow selection. The Viking Age was, a few hundred magnificent years, in European history. But I did not at that point understand the depth of Germanic religion in general and its deeper roots and its broader spread in different parts of Europe and so forth and so forth. So it was very narrow. I wanted to be a Viking, and I sort of identified that with the special forces thing and so forth, and it's something that became much broader as my understanding increased. So it started with you had the Viking Brotherhood that existed for a few years, and then in 1972, the Asatru Free Assembly was. Wait, let's see, is that right? Yeah. Well, actually, the Viking Brotherhood got the first tax recognition. The recognition from the government as a quote real organization unquote. And then later I changed the name of that to the Asatru Free Assembly. That happened in about 1976. I learned the word Asatru from a book by Magnus Magnusson, Vikings, Hammer of the North. And he said, on page 55 of that book, was the word Asatru. And he says, this is what the Vikings called their faith. And we know now today that's not necessarily true. That was an Icelandic term that was coined much later, as you pointed out, by the modern era pagans in Iceland. But that was the term that I adopted. So I was going from that just Viking warrior special forces kind of thing that is testosterone laden 21, 22, 23-year-old men, and it became a broader thing, a more general thing, a lifestyle, a way of being, a way of becoming more than we are. And it got so much deeper and so much broader after that.
How much support did the Viking Brotherhood and later the other organization that it morphed into, how many members were there? How many activities did you do? And how popular was it?
Well, it started off just tiny. I made a little newsletter called The Runestone, and the first run had 11 copies, and I produced it on. I don't know if you know what a mimeograph machine is. It was this way of duplicating printed material where you had this sort of purple colored ink and it smelled real bad, and that was what people used to use to make copies of things. And that was what our first issues came out on. And then over the years it got more sophisticated and a little more squared away, and I was learning more, and it began to grow. It went from a fistful of people to a couple of hundred people, and a couple 300 people, and gradually was growing and moving along, and then it just kept growing and changed, got more sophisticated, definitely more intellectual, definitely deeper spirituality and a deeper spiritual understanding. So it evolved over time and ultimately turned into the Asatru Folk Assembly, and that gained several hundred people. And right now I think that the AFA is probably running like something like 1,000 people or so here in in North America and throughout other countries.
Yeah, you have an Asatru Folk Assembly Scandinavia department.
Oh yes, we're in several different, quite a number of different countries around the world, much of Europe, South Africa, and so forth. Australia, New Zealand, that area.
So, throughout your career in the Viking Brotherhood and the other organizations you've been involved with, how did normies or regular people, how did they treat this, that people were calling themselves Asatru or Vikings and doing this stuff? How did the system, how did the press and police and regular people, how did they treat you? Did they treat you in a neutral way, or did they dislike you and your gang of brothers?
Well, at first, people probably thought we were just crazy or, hippies or whatever. And only a handful of people would truly understand us and understand the importance of what we were trying to do at that point. We got along okay with, law enforcement and so forth. When I was in the military, I actually, at one point, I had Asatru on my identification tags, or dog tags as we call them. But as the folkish aspects of it came more and more into importance, then of course the left began to hate us very much, and they really hate us now. They hate our organization. There are some non-folkish, or as we would say, universalist aspects or organizations in Asatru that are very politically correct and go along with a left agenda. But our organization is not like that, because we see what we do as being connected to our identity as a people. It is not a generic thing for all of humanity. It is specific to the European peoples and specifically to the, broadly speaking, Germanic people of the planet. This is our way of being in the world. This is our spiritual root. It is the expression of our soul and our heart and our culture, not that of other peoples. So that's not very politically correct, as you know. And so, some people say we're haters, which I don't think we are. Antifa hates us, but that's okay because we feel the same about them.
Yeah.
Have you had any fights or physical or direct confrontation with left-wing people, or is it more like the SPLC that writes bad stuff about you online?
Well, certainly the SPLC says horrible things about us online, and they, you know them. They have to make stuff up to scare the people into giving them donations. There's little old ladies and little old men around the world that have to be scared by Nazis, and of course, a Nazi to the SPLC is anyone who's not a leftist.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a big thing going on on the internet about the Asatru Folk Assembly, because you have been out and said, use the 14 words, and they ganged up on you and made that a law against you.
Yeah, and actually, all I said was that I did not believe that the 14 words were racist. And of course, they're not. It's simply someone speaking on behalf of the existence of their people. Now, personally, I use what I call the 8 words, which is the existence of my people is not negotiable. And it's very short and it's direct, and I think it's not as flowery, and it doesn't use tripwire words. But the meaning is basically the same. And it's not racist. I'm not saying I hate other people. I'm not saying I don't want other people to exist. I'm saying I want my people to exist.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. We live in times when when logic no longer applies to human speech.
Yeah.
So there has been no direct physical confrontation with any protesters or something like that?
Well, usually they're not that direct. They will find out if we have a venue in this place or that place, and they will call them up and they'll go on with them over the phone, and they'll threaten, and they'll say, oh, we're evil racists. Why are you having these people, and blah, 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 blah. And I know that I'm followed very closely at times. I went to a Wardruna concert over in the the San Francisco area. And, I got feedback later, through social media, McNallen and his people were there and blah, blah, blah. And here's their photographs and blah, blah, blah. And, I was going to make it very simple. My wife and I were going to go to a concert. That shouldn't be world news or anything like that. And some of my guys, they came up to me and they said, hey, Steve, we're going to walk security for you, and I thought, well, nah, that's not necessary. But they insisted, and I'm glad they did now, because I had underestimated the hatred that these people feel just for an ordinary person they disagree with. If you disagree with them, you get beat up. And if that's their impression of democracy, then democracy has some real problems. And I get, threats on social media. Somebody said, well, if you people can't take care of McNallen, I'll talk to some people in Los Angeles and they'll take care of him. Definite threats, but to hell with them. I'm not afraid of them, and bring it on.
Maybe you can explain from an Asatru folkish point of view. Is it possible for a non-Germanic person to worship Asatru, or can a non-European person worship Asatru?
Well, I can't tell somebody what they can do at home, but my very strong feeling is that they need to find the gods of their ancestors and follow them. That is where they will find happiness. That is where they will find truth and the way of their people. I completely support what's the term? The Afrocentric religions, those, modern day blacks who want to follow, say, the way of the Yoruba and so forth. And I get that, and I support that 1,000%. You go onto their websites, you go onto the news accounts of what they're doing, and you don't see any white people there. And they don't, generally speaking, in fact, I think almost without exception, and maybe completely without exception, they don't want white people there. And I'm good with that. I don't care, It's theirs. It's theirs. It belongs to them and to their people. And likewise, what we have is ours. It belongs to our people. It is an expression of our soul. And that's not hatred. It's just tribalism. It's the way of our people. And if you go to an American Indian event, it's the same way. People will let you watch things at a powwow or something like that. You can watch the dancing. You can share the culture and all of that kind of stuff. But there comes a point, and I think actually there was some reference to this in our lead up to this meeting. A friend of mine, I'll tell this little story. I think it will make it very clear for your listeners. I think your listeners already get it, but just to make sure that we're tracking right here. A friend of mine went to an Indian event, a cultural event like they do, and they highlight the dances and the customs and the costumes and all of that. But at one point, one of the elders came up to my friend and said, "Have you had a good time here?" And my friend says, "Yes, yeah, we had a wonderful time, thank you." And the elder said, "Well, I'm glad to hear that. We're glad you came. But we're going to do Indian things now, and I'm have to ask you to leave." And so he escorted him out to the car, and they conversed on the way. And the elder looked at my friend and said, "You must drink from your own well," meaning your own people's wisdom. And that's why he sought out Asatru, and he's been Asatru for decades now.
Yeah, I read that in your book. It struck me as a powerful and beautiful story, actually.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it sums up a lot. Basically, it's a matter of mutual tolerance. I don't care what other peoples do as long as they're not interfering with my people and with my 8 words, the existence of my people. I want my people to exist forever. I want my people to have good things, well-being, happiness, control over our affairs. I don't want to control other people's affairs unless it's interfering with us. It's long ago, back when email was a brand new thing. I got an email from an Afrocentric group, and they thanked me, and they said, "Thank you very much for not sending white people to our organization." and I respect that. That's fine.
Usually the word Asatru is related or means the Germanic pre-Christian pagan religious practices. But I read on Asatru Folk Assembly's website that it can also, the word Asatru can also encompass all of the pre-Christian pagan European religions. And I also saw that you had like an Italian guy who had like a chapter in Italy. So the term can mean different things. It can also be a term for all pagan religions, like the Celts and the Greeks and the Romans and things, the Slavs.
Well, actually, I don't think that was intentional. I think that's a misunderstanding. We respect all the European religions, and we see a connection between most of them really tightly. I mean, like the Celtic peoples, the Germanic peoples, and the Slavic peoples all come from what the scientists call the funnel beaker culture. And if you go and you look at them, I mean, sure, there's some differences, but mostly they're very, very much the same in their orientation. I can go online and I can go to a website or a Facebook page that deals with the modern Slavic religion, and it looks like our stuff completely. The costumes are similar, their culture is very similar, the relationship with their gods and goddesses seems to be very similar. We are basically the same in so many respects. And one thing we strongly believe is no more brother wars. We don't want to see people of European heritage fighting each other. There's not enough of us as it is. And we think it's a horrible thing when our people fight each other over something stupid like economics or politics or, the nonsensical things that the people who run countries sometimes get up to. We are strongly related. We are close kin, and we must never fight each other. That's forced, but, definitely we should do anything to avoid conflict between us. So you've got, the Slavs, the Celts, the Germanics that are all very closely related. But you look at other branches of the European peoples. You look at the Romans and the Greeks and so forth, and you still have, I guess you would say that there's a broader classification of Indo-European. And that would include, a much larger array of people, but still all basically derived from the very ancient Aryan roots, to use a very loaded word. But yeah, people freak out when you say that, but they forget that is an actual scholarly term. It's easier to say Indo-European, and it's more clearly defined, perhaps. But if you look at the structure of Indo-European religions, and some of the best work scholarly-wise on this was by a fellow Frenchman, and I can't pronounce French, but his name looks like Georges Dumézil. He compared the structure and the content and the values of all of these Indo-European religions. All of those descended from the ancient European stock, or the Aryan stock, again, to use that scary word. And he pointed out the similarities, and they're very strong. So this is actually a very useful scholarly source to analyze and to compare the different branches of our faith.
Mm. So the Italian guy on the website, he does when he performs religious practices in Italy, does he worship like Odin and Thor, or does he worship Zeus and?
Now, if he's in the AFA, he has to follow the Germanic religion. That's the religion that we practice. Now, the thing, of course, with Europe is that Germanic tribes were all over the place. Northern Europe was largely colonized by the Langobards. And so that whole Lombard region up there, that's basically us. And, where do you draw the line? If a person has had Italian grandparents, does that mean they're not us? I mean, that becomes very subjective very quickly. And people feel differently about different degrees on that. I think that probably we ride kind of just a common sense approach. If they look like us, act like us, think like us, then they can be us. So, there's a fuzzy area there. Some people would say that if you bring in Italians, that's immediately wrong. Well, okay, but there's Italians and there's Italians, and where do their roots lie the deepest? So, it's not always an easy call. So,
yeah. You talked about that there were two main strains or two main schools in Asatru. There were the folkish variant that you yourself is a part of, and then there's this universal strain. Could you explain the difference between those two school of thoughts?
Well, everything that I've described so far, as you pointed out, is what we would call folkish. We believe that there is a connection between genetics, blood, if you will, between blood and faith. We believe that we are born with certain predispositions from our ancestors, and that we are born with a connection to our gods, not somebody else's gods. And therefore, that's why we're glad there's an Afrocentric religion. There's a place for them to go, and we're glad that there's, other things for other peoples. Now, the Universalists believe that blood does not matter, kinship does not matter. Kinship in the terms of ancestry does not matter. You could be 100% Chinese, with all of your ancestors being Chinese for thousands of years, and they're absolutely fine with saying, yeah, these people should be practicing Asatru or could practice Asatru. Now, there's no law that says that a Chinaman can't follow Asatru, but he certainly is not one of us. He is not folkish. But the Universalists, at least in theory, would say, oh, no, it's fine. He can be with us. Odin listens to him too. And we just disagree about that. We see this as being a part of our soul, our ethnic soul, our blood soul. And to us, that's extremely important. And to the Universalists, that doesn't matter. They have black guys who lead their ceremonies and so forth and so forth. And we think that's a huge mistake. He needs to find his ancestors. I was in Nigeria once long ago as a young man, knocking around the world. And at that time, this was 1976, and at that time in Nigeria, you could not make a phone call outside the country unless you went to the telecommunications center there in downtown Lagos, right on the waterfront. And I remember walking out of that building once, and there was a statue in front of the telecommunications place. Appropriately, it was of the African god Shango, who is the god of, I guess, lightning and electricity and things. So I guess that ties in with the whole communications thing. And it dawned on me, this is the God that Africans need to follow. He expresses their soul. It is not the same as our soul. It is their way and the way of their people. It is not the way of my people. I would never go to Africans and say, oh, I want to participate in your religion. it's just, it wouldn't fit. It's not us.
Mm. So, but those Asatru members of the universalistic approach, why don't they just worship postmodern Christianity?
Well, I don't know. They just, they want to, they like some things about our gods. They like, I don't know, maybe they've been watching, lots of television, Vikings series and stuff like that. They're attracted by the trappings of it. And for those of them who are of European heritage, I think that there's some genuine things there. But for the ones of them who say have no European roots, I think they're just making a mistake. They need to look again. They need to look at their own ways and find their truth there, because that is where their truth is. We don't have their truth.
Is there a lot of infighting between these two groups in America?
Yes. Yeah, they a lot of them really hate us. And yeah, some of us hate them. I don't hate them. I just want them to leave us alone. But yeah, there are distinct organizations that are universalist, and they talk about how evil we are and what haters we are, and so forth and so forth. We make fun of them because we think they're very. Let's just say we think that they're very misguided.
Yeah, we have those in Denmark too.
So are there other folkish Asatru organizations besides your organization, Asatru Folk Assembly in America?
There are some. I'm sure that there are independent groups and so forth. There's the Asatru Alliance, which is based out of Arizona. It's led by Valgard Murray, or was founded by Valgard Murray, and even though he doesn't officially head it anymore, he's turned that over to a younger fellow. But we all still think of Valgard as being the Asatru Alliance guy. I've known Valgard for many, many, many years. He's an awesome guy, and they do great stuff. You can definitely be an independent practitioner in America. You don't have to belong to an organization. I run into people who I agree with, as much as I can tell, 100%. But, they just want to be independent. And if that's what they want, then, go ahead, do that. We would love to have them with us because we think that there is strength in numbers. But you don't have to belong to an organization to be folkish or Asatru.
So what is in terms of how many, if it took all the Asatru people in the world who practices this religion, how many of them would be folkish and how many of them would be universalistic?
Well, let's see. Let me see. I think that's probably an impossible question to answer because I just don't think we know that. But let's kind of work with the numbers a little. In Iceland, you have about 4,000 Asatru are people who say that they're Asatru, but it's an official religion, and I don't even know how much it means to them. I mean, some of them are very devout and very sincere. Many of them, they think the gods are just symbolic and so forth and so forth, whereas my feeling is very much different from that. I believe the gods are very real. And for a lot of them, I think it's a heritage thing. So that's, say, 4,000, almost 100%, maybe 100% universalist, because they don't seem to understand the danger that their culture and our culture is in. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be very hard to get that number because we don't know about all the people who just practice independently.
So, but the universalistic faction is the dominant one.
I'm not sure. I don't think we can say in terms of official numbers. That block of 4,000 gives them a lot of influence up in Iceland. But we just don't have figures for America. We know how many are in the AFA. We know I don't know how many people are in the Asatru Alliance. It's a smaller number. I don't know how many independent ones there are out there, people who just belong to little local groups and never join a national group. And, I will probably never meet most of those people. I'm sure that there are thousands of. I think that those in America who are folkish are numerous, even if they don't belong to a group. There's so many people of European heritage in America who understand that something is badly wrong with our culture. Something is sick about our civilization, the whole postmodernist worldview. And many of those people, they're not getting what they need from Christianity. I think that there are a lot of Asatru or whatever they call themselves. They may not call themselves Asatru. They may not even know that word. They may call themselves Odinists. If they're of Germanic interest, they might call them Wotanists. But it's all essentially the same. I don't know that we can even make a good guess about whether it's more universalists or folkish. But we're so much better that we don't care about them anyway.
Yeah, and it might be that some of the folkish are hiding themselves a bit because it's so politically incorrect to say that you care about your own people. If you're white, if you're not white,
exactly,
then that's perfectly okay.
Exactly, it's a double standard, absolutely a double standard. If you can make one statement about people who are not white, and then you make exactly the same kind of statement about people who are white, and that's racism. And it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Political correctness run amok.
You do a lot of meta-political work and meta-religious work. I would call it. There's the Wotan Network, the Case of the Kenwick Man, the Asatru Handbook for Military Personnel, and the Sign of Mjolnir on tombstones of fallen soldiers and so on. This, in your view, a part of being a folkish Asatru?
Yes, I think so, because we are obliged from a spiritual standpoint to care about our people, about our people's survival. And people will do different things. Some of them may not be political in any deep sense, but at least their general worldview is one that is supportive of that. And most of us feel a need to do something active for the survival of our people. And of course, the best thing you can do for the survival of our people is to get married to a good person and to have wonderful babies. And that is just real world stuff. And of course, people can vote however they feel is correct to vote. People can support politics. But I think that as you imply, the meta-politics is very important as well. I think that politics is, as we would say, downstream from things like meta-politics, culture, philosophy, and so forth. So there are many ways that people can support the existence of our people. And I am very interested in doing those things. As you say, I'm very meta-politically active. Wotan Network is probably the main thing that I do. And I think of it as a sort of non-structured psychological operations kind of thing. It's metacultural in that our job with the Wotan Network is to awaken our people. And that awakening will lead to the steps that are necessary to protect and to care for our people. But the first thing is that awakening, to be touched by the furious might of particularly Wotan or Odin or Woden, whichever term you wish to call him by. It's all the same power. That awakening has happened before in history, and we want to provoke that. We want that to happen. We want to set the spiritual environment such that people of European heritage will open their eyes and open their minds and say, oh my goodness, we're in danger. Our numbers are dropping. Our influence is dropping. We are now demonized by the establishment press. We're talking about the day when people of European heritage will be a minority in the United States. We're looking at the situation in Europe where our brothers and sisters over there, their countries are being occupied by a massive invasion that no one has the power to reverse. And we stand in solidarity with you, by the way. We see all this happening, but people need to open their eyes. They've got to end the trance. It's like they're all hypnotized by media and by the popular culture and by video games and by all the crap that permeates our culture. The endless amusements, the endless opportunities for staying mentally and psychologically asleep. We must wake them up. We must reach inside and say, listen, your ancestors are calling you. The people who gave you birth are calling you. Your long line of mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers and those beyond for 1,000 generations are calling out to you. Wake up, wake up, wake up. And it is my duty to help bring about that awakening.
So how does the Votan network, how does it function? How is it structured?
Well, it's very little structure. I modeled it after some of the recent trends in political and social movements, with lots of decentralization. There's no vertical structure, really. I'm the guy who set it up. But the way we operate is by producing memes and encouraging people to share those memes on social media. That's one thing we do. Another thing we do is a project called Votan on the Peaks. And that name was inspired by the book Meditations on the Peaks by Julius Evola. And the whole idea in Votan on the Peaks is that people will get together. Usually it's a couple of guys. It can be 3, 4, 5 people. In some cases, we've done it like with, 10 or 12 people. And it's very simple. It's very simple. They go out into nature and they climb a mountain. It doesn't have to be like the Himalayas or even the Alps or anything like that. It can be whatever kind of mountain you have close to where you live. I guess in Florida, it would be 300 feet. but here in California, we have some very nice mountains. And we not just in California, but around the world. Those of us who follow this way and who do the Votan on the Peaks experience, we climb the mountain with our friends or alone. And the effort, the sweat, the exertion that we put into that is, so to speak, our sacrifice to Votan. And on the top of that peak, we have a horn and we pour mead into it. And we give honor and praise to Votan, and we call upon Votan to awaken our people, awaken our folk, so that we will stand tall and strong and care about ourselves and to care about our ancestors and those generations yet to come. And it can be a very, very simple toast and a pouring. It could be an elaborate blot, whatever people are inclined to do. A blot is always a two-way exchange. It is our gift to the gods and the gods' gift to us. And our gift to the gods in the Votan on the Peaks is the climb, the exertion, the sweat, our labored breathing. And what we ask is not so much for us as for all our folk around the world, that we be awakened. And it's kind of a popular thing. It's an outdoor thing, and that's good because we think that people need to be somewhat athletic. They need to get out into nature. They need to walk. They need to climb. They need to move their bodies. They need to do difficult things. We believe it is good to do difficult things because that makes us stronger. And, we've done, I don't know how many have been done, 100, 200, 300. Occasionally in Europe, we had some folks that, I think some folks did something comparable at Externsteine in Germany, which is not a mountain, it's true, but the spirit is much the same. So, it's something that's getting around, and I would love to see 1,000.
So everybody can do it? Climb a mountain and call for Wotan? Absolutely.
You could go out and do one tomorrow morning if you wanted to.
Okay, so it's not a specific date or something?
No, it's whenever you want to do it.
Okay.
Now, there is kind of a somewhat more organized event that happens, and that's not something I started, but there's the Odin World Prayer Day, which you can find online. Got a Facebook page, of course, like everything else in the world, except for those of us who've been kicked off of Facebook.
It happens.
It happens. If you haven't been kicked off of Facebook at least once, then you're doing something wrong, But wonderful guy, Anders Nielsen, heads that up. He founded it, and on the 9th day of every month, all around the world, people go out and they do some form of honoring Odin. And that can be going out in your backyard and pouring a horn and offering a prayer and speaking to him. Or it can be something much more complicated, whatever you do. And it's really a good thing because people then, they post this on social media and they post it on the Odin World Prayer Day site. And it shows that we're all around the world. It shows that we live in every country where our people live, and that whether we're Danish or German or English or American or whatever, as long as you are of our people, that we are unified in this. So I strongly suggest Odin World Prayer Day to all your listeners. Join us once a month and stand with hundreds of us all around the world. And we will be united in this way.
So if you create a meme for the Wotan network, or if you do a mountain climb, do you send pictures and videos and whatever of those events or memes that you perhaps have created yourself? Do you send them to someone and then it's disseminated, or do you just disseminate it yourself?
We like to see it disseminated over and over and over. It's not like there's one central place that is the only place that does it. Quite the contrary. What we would love to get is many, many shares, say for example, on Facebook or Twitter or wherever it is that one does this. It's a group effort. It is not structured. It is a networked insurgency is what they would call it in the military. It's absolutely free form. Anybody can take part. If people want to go on to Facebook, and we've got one closed group, a couple of closed groups maybe, but there's a page open to the public called the Wotan Network, and we invite them, come on board, take a look. If you like our stuff, share it. Share it all around and ask your friends to share it. Get as many shares as possible. It's absolutely driven by the individual effort and by the individual people that want to make it happen. And if I could get 1 million shares, that'd be awesome. If I get a few hundred, that's still better than nothing. If I get a fistful, that's better than nothing. So again, it's like I say, it's free form. There's no structure to it except the general principle, which is the awakening of our people.
Okay. So, in terms of this religion, this pre-Christian European religion called Asatru, could you give us like a introduction? What is this religion? I mean, how was the world created? Who are the gods? Where are the gods? What is the relationship between the gods and human beings? And what is this thing?
Let's see where to start. Let's start with, people always ask, do we have something like the Bible? And the answer to that is no, not really. The Bible, if you're a Christian, is literally, the Word of God, absolutely infallible, absolutely the same all the time, except, of course, it never is because it's in a zillion different translations anyway. But we don't have anything that is absolute, like rock solid, you have to believe this or you're not one of us kind of thing, with the exception of one or two very basic principles. But we do have sources that are useful to us and that we use as general guidance. Now, in the north, the far north, this was characterized by what we call the Eddas. And there's two different documents that bear the name Eddas. One of them is the Elder Edda, which is a manuscript that, from Iceland that goes back quite a long ways. Another one is Snorri Sturluson's Edda, which is actually a handbook of poetry and how to use the old poetic metaphors, the kennings, as they were called in the old Germanic, the old Norse poetry. And in order to compose that poetry and to use all of these words, you had to understand the old myths. And so it is a compilation of the myths so that we can say that, when we say such and such in the poem, it means this, it means honor or courage or Odin, or it means Thor, or it means something else, So it's about poetic metaphors. But the ones that I think contain the greater portion of, shall we say, spiritual knowledge, is found in the other Edda, the Elder Edda. And there are many different poems in there, and some of them are particularly relevant and some are not so relevant. There are poems about particular events or particular leaders or whatever. But there are two that I think are particularly valuable. One of them is called the Hofs, which means in Old Norse roughly the words of the High One, and which of course is Odin. And these are compilations of just, shall we say, good sense, good advice, how to live a life that is honorable, a life that is valuable, a life that works well, how to treat other peoples, how to get along in a dangerous world. And people might say, oh, well, that was a dangerous world back then, but it's not now. But I think that's not realistic. I think danger is something you can find anywhere. And getting along with people is something you have to understand in different ways. But also there are deeper things on how to behave, what is the right behavior in company and on the road and among friends. How do friends stay friends? How do they build their bonds? All of these words of the High One, I think, are very important for daily life. The other one is the Folosbau, which is sort of a quickie look at the origin of things and the end of things and the beginning of a new cycle. Because with us, it's all about cycles. We think that Ragnarok, the battle at the end of this era of time, is also a new beginning. That nature is cyclical, our lives are cyclical, and the huge eons or epochs are also cyclical. There's really no end per se. It's like, almost like, and I say this kind of lightly, but still with some truth, that life is a game that we have to learn how to play, and we will win some and we will lose some, but in the end, there will be another cycle. It's a lot like, it reminds me of the things out of the ancient Aryan writings from India, the whole idea of one cycle following upon another. I think that we have a lot of that kind of ideas in our European expression as well. So the Folosbau is where we find a lot of the mythological lore about the gods and the goddesses and so forth. So both of those, I think, are useful documents to read. They're not always easy to read because, that's not the way people write today. But once you kind of get the hang of it, it flows along very nicely, and there's some very good stuff there. If I had been thinking, I would have had a couple of volumes within my arm's reach, and I would have just read you a few of them. But you can find translations of those. You can find them online. Certainly, just look for the Elder Edda, look for the Havamal, look for the Folosbau, and you can get easy access to those. People who believe that the Bible is the Word of God will argue forever over about what a line means or a word means. And sometimes we do that in Asatru, but I'm not sure that is so very important. I don't know that the gods and the goddesses have that much invested in these tiny little details. I think they want us to lead good lives, to live honorable lives, noble lives, to strive for a good reputation, to strive for high repute, and for those who can win it, fame and wealth. And for those who are not those who will win fame and wealth, then strive for a good life and a sound reputation, and children and grandchildren to remember your name.
Okay. So the gods, they live in the sky, or they live in a different world away from us?
Yes. And where that world is, I can't point at it. I guess today, in modern terms, we would say it's like a different dimension or whatever. Yeah, it's not like a part of this universe. It's not like, on some star somewhere or somewhere else in the cosmos that we know. It's a different place. And obviously, because we live in 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, that's something we can't really comprehend. And so I don't really worry about it a lot. But my own personal experience is that the gods are real, and that they interact with us as they choose. And sometimes we probably are not aware of that, and other times we are very aware of that.
So who created us human beings? Were we created by the gods?
Well, the story about the creation, and I will put the word creation in quotation marks because it's kind of creation and it's kind of not. See, I think all these are metaphorical. I don't think that they are, absolute, literal. If you had a camera, you could have photographed Odin doing this, that, or the other. I think it's much more subtle than that. In our way, the gods and goddesses don't create people out of nothing. It's as though there's part of an evolution that, it's part of a long process. But essentially, the gods, or some of them, were walking along the beach, and the story is that they found trees there, and that they gave those trees the various gifts that make us human. They gave those trees life and intelligence and breath and all of several different I guess you would say parts of the soul. and they gave them name, Ask and Embla, and from that, all of us supposedly come. When we say all of us, I think it just means us, the northern folk. I don't think it means that African people started from the same place. I'm sure they have their creation myths. But again, to me, these are not literally, events in the space and time that we know, that this is metaphorical, but that nevertheless there are truths encoded in it. And by being aware of that, we can use the myths. So yes, I believe the gods and goddesses are real. I don't think that they look like us. They probably look like whatever they want to look like. They're pretty powerful. And while the stories about them are useful and make good points, some of them make moral points or philosophical points, and others tell us things about ourselves and about our relationship to the gods. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Someone once said that a myth is something that never happened, but which is always true. And I like that.
Yeah. Is there good or bad behavior in Asatru? I know you have you have these 9 noble virtues.
Yes. Definitely there's good behavior and bad behavior. And the 9 noble virtues are something that was developed. I'm pretty sure that the people who came up with that were the Odinic Rite in England back in maybe the early 70s. That's my guess. They are obviously, they're not out of an old manuscript or something. They are a modern way of putting things into perspective and into expressing, the right ways to be. And for your listeners, I have them listed here. These are courage, truth, honor, fidelity. That's a very Latin word, but we would say troth. Discipline, hospitality, industriousness, self-reliance, and perseverance. And a lot of those words aren't even of Germanic origin. Fidelity, of course, is very Roman, and some of the others are too. But that's the idea. Noble behavior, to honor the holy powers, to fulfill your duties to people around you, to strive to be the truest, the bravest, and the noblest person that you can be. I think it's a very evolutionary faith in a way, because we're always trying to evolve ourselves to higher levels. We're not satisfied with just kind of getting along, especially those of us who follow Odin, who is, shall we say, the god of upward evolution, the god of spiritual growth and development. And all of those like myself who follow him specifically as our special friend among the gods, that's a very important thing to us.
It's actually just as a quick story. The 3rd largest city in Denmark is named after Odin, Odense. So,
yes. That's wonderful.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you behave in a negative way, or as the Christians would say, in a sinful way, do the gods punish you for that behavior?
Well, not exactly. I think it's both simpler and more complicated than that. It's not like Odin or Thor or any of the others are up there, waiting for us to make a mistake or to do something wrong, and then they reach down and clobber us or something. It's more like cause and effect. It's the idea that basically you make your own luck by good deeds and by bad deeds, by developing good traits or by developing bad traits within yourself. It's pretty much a natural process. It's very much like karma. Again, a word that I'm sure has old Indo-Aryan roots. But it's much that idea that That basically if you do the right thing, if you live the right kind of life, good things are going to happen to you. But it's not because somebody up there is, a God is keeping score. It's because of cause and effect. And I'm much more comfortable with that idea actually than thinking that there's, Odin is keeping tabs on me and keeping a list. It's not like Santa Claus in the sky or something, gonna reward the good kids and whatever, But there in Germanic mythology or Germanic landscape, I guess you would say, there are two main features. One is Yggdrasil, the world tree, the Irminsul, the central pillar, so to speak. There's lots of, that kind of idea all across Europe, one way or another. And the other feature is the well of the past, the well of that which has become, the well of earth. And the metaphor or the picture that we use here is that all the things that we do, especially the important things that we do, or maybe the distilled essence of the things we do, goes into the well. It goes into the well of the past, and it lays there in layers. And those layers are twisted, and they weave, and they flow among each other like the writhing of serpents. And if you put good things into the well, you get good results. If you put bad deeds into the world, into the well, if you put weakness, if you put hate, if you put stupidity, if you put laziness into the well, that's what you get. If you put striving and effort and nobility into the well, that's what you get. We get that in our daily lives, that the things we put into the well affect the quality of our lives. So that's why some of our rituals are the way they are. We have a ritual we call the Sommel. And in Sommel, we sit in a circle. In the old days, this was always done inside a hall. Often we do it around a campfire. And there is a certain degree of ritual to this, a certain degree of ceremony we go to. But the bottom line is that we pass the horn around, the horn of mead. And like for us here in the AFA, what we typically do, the first one is to the god or the goddess that we honor. And the second time around, we honor an ancestor. And someone who has gone before us, someone whose deeds are in the well. And then the third time, we do either one of those, or we could do so. We might recite a poem, we might sing a song, we might do something of that sort. But the idea is that when we do that, when we pass around that horn and the mead in it represents the well of earth. It represents the well of weird, the well of the past. When we pass that around, we drink from the past. We conjure up the strength of the past, the might of the past, the ancestors and their deeds and their love and how they were, their memory. We bring that from the past into the present. We bring all of these virtues and talents and great deeds from the past into the present among us as we pass the horn, so that we can then use that strength, that nobility, that courage, that honor, that love in today's life.
Okay. Could you talk about who are the gods? I mean, what are their name and what do they do and how is their personality and stuff? Sigtyr, when I talked to him last time, he talked about that there were two tribes of gods. There were the Asa or Asir, and then there's like the veins, or I'm not sure what in Danish they call the Vader.
Yeah. That's the general breakdown. There are different families or tribes of gods in the stories that we have. And their focus is a bit different. The Aesir are the Aces. These are like Odin, Thor, the more aggressive gods in a way. They are often associated with the sky, and then the Vanir or the Wanes or the Vanes, they are more associated with fertility and wealth and well-being. They're the gods of the harvest, typically, and so forth. And that fellow I mentioned earlier, the Frenchman, Dumézil, he did something he called the tripartite Indo-European structure, which is very long words, meaning that if you look at the gods of the European peoples and the other peoples we're related to around the world and through the centuries, you find three different, what he called, and it's the French word, so it's probably not exactly like he would mean it in English, but he called it the functions. And the first function deals with sovereignty, kingship, rulership, who's running things, and also with the holy. And then the second function in his structure deals with the application of military force. So we're thinking Thor here, or maybe Tyr sometimes, and there's some overlap clearly. And then the third function deals with fertility and well-being. And we kind of see that in the mythology. Odin is connected with rulership, kingship, obviously, also with the acquisition of wisdom. Perhaps wisdom more than anything. The god of spiritual evolution and of becoming more than we are. That's definitely Odin. Now, Tyr shares a lot of the first function role as well, because he is a god of justice. He's a god of good government and so forth. Now, Thor is much more the physical application kind of thing. Thor is a god of strength. He's a warrior god in its most fundamental way. I mean, Odin participates in war and is a god of war in some other respects, but as a means of overcoming oneself and as a means of accomplishing great deeds. With Thor, it's strength and courage. Then with third function, as Dumézil would say, we have Frey and Freya, Nerthus, and other deities that are associated with the harvest, with reproduction, with sexuality, with enjoying the fruits of the earth, and to enjoying the good things around us. So that actually gives you a pretty reasonable idea of who some of the main players are and the different roles they have. That analysis of Dumézil is something I really recommend to any of your listeners who are very interested in the mythology or anything, because he gives a good breakdown, and he's pretty much on our side in a lot of ways. The leftist scholars today don't like him because, well, all the usual reasons, but I think that his breakdown of the Indo-European deities and societies is really a useful tool for understanding who some of our gods are and the roles that they play in society and in our spiritual lives.
But what is the relationship between us and the gods? Are we supposed to bow down for them, or what are your takes about that?
I've got my strong feelings about that, and other people feel differently. I have never felt that Odin wanted me to bow down to him. And that doesn't mean that I don't respect him. I do. He is, fearsome and mighty. But I feel that the essence of the gods and the essence of us as their, figuratively speaking, sons and daughters is the same. We share consciousness. We share all of the things that we are as human beings. I think that the gods are this, but much more. I think that the essence, for example, the essence of Thor is the essence of me and ordinary human being. The difference is not in essence, it is in magnitude. If if Thor is a raging waterfall, I am a leaky faucet. but the essence is the same. But again, it's a difference in scale. The wisest man in the world is representing part of the essence of Odin, but Odin's comprehension is so much more. So we are different from the gods and the goddesses, not in our inner natures, which is very much a nature that we reflect with them, but they are so much more. I do not see the gods and the goddesses as there to be our masters. In particular, I think of Odin, who is the god I follow. And Odin doesn't want me to get down on my knees and grovel before him and to humiliate myself. I think that what Odin wants me to do is to become like him, to climb the ladder of spiritual evolution, to be more than I am now, to become. And when I say become, that should be spelled with the large letter B, because it is so important. It is a universal. It's not just become as we would use that word speaking to our friends. It is to become in a deep and archetypal sense, to become wiser, more knowledgeable, to explore the world of our spirituality in all its fullness, for example, and comparably for the other deities, I think. But I think the gods want us to become like them. They're saying, get off your ass, come on, stress yourself, push yourself, do more, become more, be braver, be stronger, be more noble, be wiser, be more than you are. Become our worthy sons and daughters.
Yeah. I think that's the same as in other religions, where the worshippers try to become like Christ or Allah or Buddha or whatever.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Could you talk about the giants? Who are the giants? Where do they live? What is their role? And especially the most famous or important giant, which I guess is Loki.
Well, yeah, the relationship with these beings is a peculiar one. The giants, I think, in many ways represent archetypal forces. They are generally, not always by any means, but their reputation is one of not being that bright, of being strong primal forces. I think of them as, obviously you have fire giants or frost giants or whatever. They're personifications almost of these things. And the relationship between the giants and the gods is kind of a back and forth one. It's an ambiguous one. I mean, various of the gods are said to be part giant, and I don't know if this is a anthropomorphization to illustrate some sort of a particular point, or what is exactly. Sometimes the gods and the giants are in huge opposition. Other times they make deals with each other. They deal with each other and they bargain with each other. You have the giant who was going to erect the wall around Asgard and so forth. And often these deals have hidden clauses, or there's strife, there's trouble over some of these relationships. And of course, the idea is that at Ragnarok, the gods and the giants will be in conflict. I think of, this is just me. I think that in many ways the giants are an expression of lower nature, and that the gods and the goddesses represent a higher nature, a different sort of way of being. But, there are some people who worship the giants, and it's always a very kind of a strange relationship, a real ambiguity there. I personally, I don't understand why anyone would worship the giants, but, I don't get that. I just don't. And if it comes down to fisticuffs or to battle, then I'm on the side of the gods. But there are certainly instances in the mythology of the giants and the gods cooperating for mutual ends. So that's just kind of like the world around us. It's not always simple. Often the world is ambiguous.
So the relationship between the giants and the gods, you can almost say like chaos and cosmos, where cosmos is waging a war against chaos to create a beautiful place where it's possible to live.
Yeah, I like that. I would say that you could look at it as the struggle against entropy in physics, I suppose. Yeah.
And so there's one giant, as far as I understand it, called Loki, who lives with the gods and is some sort of brother in spirit or something, or a close friend with Thor. Could you talk about who is Loki and what is his role?
Well, I think that many of us don't really think much about the aspects of Loki that relates him specifically to the giants. He's generally considered a god, but he is a very different sort of character. He's a trickster. He does dishonorable things, and he causes problems, and he gets the gods in trouble. But then he usually they take a hold of him and have him go and fix the problem that he has caused, or he provides the answers, the solutions to their problems as well. He's a very ambiguous character. Some people are very comfortable with Loki. I am not. I feel that any specific role that he has in the mythology that is of great importance is probably one that I'm still trying to get my head around. I think that there are paradoxes, so to speak, involved with the whole Ragnarok story, that in some way his misdeeds still serve higher evolution. And I'm still trying to get my head around some of that. But, these are things people think about is, it's probably not a simple relationship. It's very easy to say, well, Loki is always the bad guy, or Loki is the enemy of the gods. But on a deeper level, that's not really true. So it's kind of complicated.
You talked about earlier that you saw the gods as actually physical living beings, maybe not physical, but definitely living creatures, and some saw them differently. How does other people see them? Could they be seen as metaphors for like forces in nature, like growth or lightning or something like that, or could they be seen as idealized versions of ourselves who we are supposed to be, or could they be seen like a representation of our Germanic ancestors?
I think all of those are true. And certainly there are people who look at them in all those ways at once. I would probably look at them in all those ways at once. For some people, they are nothing more than just metaphors. For some of us, those metaphors make sense and reflect a truth, but behind that there is a conscious, sentient being with whom it is possible to interact. I've had strange things happen to me that can't be explained by metaphors or idealized versions of ourselves.
Tell us about those. Have you had any experiences you like to share with us?
I'll be glad to tell you about a couple of those. In some cases, let's start off with an easy one. The runes. Using the runes for divination. So A lot of people do that in the same way that some people would use tarot or I Ching or other divination means, right? But then some other people use runes for that purpose. Once upon a time, I had a question that I was dealing with, and I decided that I would draw one rune a day. And I was using what we call the Elder Futhark, which is the older group of runes, of which there are 24. 24 runes in the Elder Futhark. Futhark being the rune row. You could call them an alphabet, but they're not really an alphabet. But you get the idea. And so there's 24 little pieces of wood with the runes carved on them. And I put them inside a leather bag. Now, the rune tiles are all the same feel, same touch, same size, so that I can't touch one and tell you what one it is, you know? So I put them in the bag and I shake them up. And I reach in and I pull one out. It was the rune Perthro. Okay. And so the next day, I put Perthro back in. And I shake them up, randomize them very well, reach in blindly, pull one out, Perthro again. That happened, say, 5 times in a row. Now, what are the chances of that? Well, so that would be 24 times 24 times 24 times 24 times 24, which comes out to something like 7.8 million, 7.3 million. So it was one chance in more than 7 million of getting that particular combination. And years later, I read a book by a woman named Freya Aswin. And in her book, she says, if you keep getting Perthro, it means you're not supposed to know the answer. Now, you could say that was just chance, but I think it's stretching it to say that is just chance. 1 in 7 point something million. And it's not like I go around reading the runes all the time. You know, it's something I do not even once a year. But I think that was significant and points out that there is, whether or not you want to personalize that and say it has to do with a god or a goddess is one thing. You could say, well, it has to do with, I don't know, the structure of the universe or something. But still, it's kind of an outstanding thing. And the other things have happened to me. Once I was traveling in Africa, and I had just gone down through the Sahara, down through the central route, and I kind of made a mistake on getting my visas in order. And so I was flying out of Agadez in Niger down to Cotonou, which is right next door to Nigeria. And I thought, I don't have a visa for this country I'm on a plane and going to. I'm going to be landing there in an hour, and I don't have a visa. And it was kind of a bad year to be traveling in Africa for a young white man of military age, because there were 3 different insurgencies happening on the continent with a lot of young white men serving as mercenaries. And I know that if they search me, they will find a South African visa hidden away in a pouch around my neck. So I get off the plane and I think, what am I going to do with this? You know, and if they find that, I could get in deep trouble. A young man had been pulled off an airplane somewhere in Africa just a couple of months before and shot dead because he had South African military gear. So, now I didn't have anything like that, but in Africa, it's very unique. We get off the airplane, and here, 50 feet in front of me, is a fellow with an AK-47 over his shoulder, and he's looking at everybody's passport. And I'm starting to think, oh man, this is not a good day. And he keeps, we're filing past him, and he's looking at everybody's passport and handing it back, and I'm thinking, well, I'll make up a story. I'll be a burned out hippie. And I'll say, hey, dude, I thought this was Marrakesh. And that was the best story I could come up with on short notice. So he's right there, and he's got his AK. And I'm noticing that AK, man. My eyes are focused on that baby. And he takes the passport from the guy in front of me, looks at it, hands it back to him, and then he looks through me. He looks through me. No eye contact, no body language, nothing, and takes the passport from the guy behind me. Now you could say, well, that's just a chance. And of course it's just a chance. Anything could just be a chance. But I've always felt that there was direct intervention by someone at that point. And it could have been my ancestors, or it could have been the one-eyed God. But the thing that has affected me most happened to me in Germany, actually. 2013, I was in Denmark, and after Denmark, my friends and I drove down to Germany, and we saw important places there. We went to Sachsenhain, we went to Externsteine and some other places. And then we're driving back up. Our plan is, okay, we're going to go up, we're going to spend the night in Lübeck, and then we're going to go across the ferry and fly out of Copenhagen. And so we go to Lübeck, beautiful city, old city with all that brick architecture like they have there. And it turns out it was an old Viking center back in the old days. So that was kind of cool. We get up the next morning. We're going to walk down to our car, which is a couple of 100 meters at the most. We're going to get in the car and we're going to drive to the ferry. And this is literally our last, hour, 2 hours or so in Germany. And we're walking down the sidewalk. We come to an antique store. And I'm not interested in antiques, but some people, usually the ladies, are. And so the ladies, our wives went in to look at antiques. And we stood around on the sidewalk for a minute. And then one of the guys I was with says, well, what the heck, I'm going to go in too. Okay, so me and one other guy standing on the sidewalk. And then he says, well, I'm going to go in. And I stand outside for about 2 minutes and I feel really stupid. And so I decide to go in. And I open the door and just, 2 meters from the door is an old German fellow with white hair and big rosy cheeks and a bright smile and beautiful blue eyes. And he says something to me, in German, which I don't understand. So I said something to him in English, which he didn't understand, and we both laughed. But I felt like he was looking at, I was wearing a boonie hat, one of those floppy hats the military uses. And I felt like I felt like he was almost saying something about that, but I don't know. So I go in and I'm looking around. And there was literally tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 different things in that museum. It was quite a few meters, many meters on every side, and packed solid with stuff. Everything you can imagine, from books to furniture to clothing to whatever, And none of which was very interesting to me, but there was this table, a very small table, less than a meter on either side. And on it, there were 5 or 6 books and a very simple piece of jewelry, an arm ring. And I look at the books and I think, well, my German's not good enough to get much out of them. And I don't really want to carry a lot of stuff anyway, because I'm traveling and it's always a pain carrying a lot of stuff. So I picked up the arm ring and I thought, well, this is strange. I wonder what this is about. And then I thought, but I don't need something like this. And so I put it back down and went away and looked at other things. And then I came back a little bit later, a few minutes later. I looked at it and I picked it up again. And I thought, that's intriguing, but I don't need this. And I walked away. I came back the 3rd time, and I think that may be significant because it's part of an old pattern. And I didn't think of that at the time. I did not think of that. I just, okay, I got to know what this is. So I said, Entschuldigen Sie bitte, was ist das? And the guy, the old man who had been at the door, his eyes got big and bright. And he said to me 3 times the same words. He said in English, you must have this. And he said that 3 times. And he said, I sell you this for €1. Now, so I say, okay. And I take it And I go up to the front, and he's wrapping it up. And he keeps saying, Deutsche, strong. Deutsche, strong. And so that was that. So in retrospect, when this was all over, I got to thinking back to a folklore class I had taken once. And there is a whole motif in folklore of something that is offered 3 times and which is accepted. And there always has to be a price, but the price can be ridiculously low, which this certainly was. And I felt that was very significant. And I got back on the plane, came to America, sitting around with a friend of mine a few weeks later, who was a very knowledgeable young man. And I told him this story, and I showed him the armory. And he said, Steve, you may not know what this is, but this pattern, with the exception of this, the little 2 little parts where it comes together. He says the pattern is that of an old Celto-Viking armory. And he says, the reason I know, he says to me, is because I have one that is a museum replica. And he showed me his the next day, and it was identical to mine except for that one detail. So I found that to be so intriguing, the fact that it was offered 3 times and that I decided to take it on the 3rd time, the fact that there had to be a price, but the price was €1, nothing, and to a tourist, in an antique shop. And the fact that all the books that were on that little table all pertained to Germanic history. And so that, and the little old guy kept saying, Deutsche, strong, Deutsche, strong. To me, the chances of that being an accident were incredibly tiny. And it was something of spiritual import. Because, as you know, in the old days, the leader, shall we say, whether you call him, the Drighton, the war leader, the whatever, would give to his followers, to his sworn men, an arm ring or a weapon, but it could be an arm ring as well. And that was the gift that was given. And what that person then owed was the gift of loyalty. On the battlefield or wherever. And I have considered this to be a personal message, a personal obligation. I felt as though, because the things that I had done in Germany dealt very heavily with Wotan in some of the places that we had been, and with the idea of loyalty to the old ways and so forth. And so I felt like this was my arm ring, and that every Wednesday I take this and I hold it in my hands and I swear loyalty and bravery to Odin. And to me, this was an encounter. I don't mean the old man was Odin or Wotan, but I feel that symbolic relationship was so strong that it speaks definitely of a presence that was aware of my existence and that understood my devotion and my loyalty and was formally recognizing that and making that bargain with me. Here's this arm ring. Now you owe me your loyalty and bravery. And so that's
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have you tried to, whether if you have had a bloat and felt the presence of the gods and
oh yes.
there? Yeah.
Oh yes. That's quite common. We have had strange things happen during bloats. I did a bloat with Valgard Murray and the Asatru Alliance years ago. And for me, it was a very powerful one. But afterwards, several people independently said that they had felt not just a spiritual presence, that they had felt, well, as Valgard said, somebody hit me on the back. Not a hit, but, just kind of a tap on the back. And several people felt the same sorts of things. And there was nobody out there doing this. There was no human being doing this. So it was, at the very least, it was I guess they would say a psychokinetic reaction of some sort. So at the very least, that happened. I've had people came up to me after one episode, one thing that we did, and a couple of people told me that they saw the earth moving, like a ripple, like rolling. Two guys separately came up to me and told me that. And that had been a ritual in which we called upon the might of all the Germanic tribes, and we read off so many of those tribes, and called upon their inspiration and their might to help us, so that we could bring back the old ways, and so that our folk, whether in Germany or anywhere on the continent or anywhere around wherever our blood is, that we would come home, that we would come back to that way which is ours, and that we would stand up for the existence and the welfare and the well-being of our people. So apparently that was a very powerful one. This sort of thing happens. And you could say, well, it's just some sort of some psychic effect we don't understand, but whatever. You can put labels on things all day long, but it doesn't describe them. So yeah, to me, the gods are real. I don't think that they sit around and look like you and me. I don't think that they literally live in a hall where they wear clothing from the 10th century. I don't think it's like that. But I believe that they are intelligences and forces, and that we have these pictures by which we see them, and we always lock those pictures into the distant past. But we might pass them on the street. They wouldn't be wearing helmets and carrying axes. It's not like that. Odin is a spiritual being, and as a spiritual being, he can take any form he wants or have no outer form, whatever. It's Odin in particular is a god of consciousness and expanded consciousness. And there's the term non-locality that they have in particle physics. And it's strange because in essence, if I'm trying to get my head around it, but it means basically the idea that all things are one, but they're not. Yeah. Everything touches in a way, but it doesn't, because our ideas of space and time are determined by our sensory organs and the structure of our brains. But that, in physics, a particle can be in two places at the same time, an elementary particle. The whole question of Schrodinger's cat, that thought experiment in physics is that, well, you've got this cat in here, and whether or not it's alive depends upon the decay of a radioactive isotope. Right? It's a thought experiment, a Gedanken experiment, and there are contradictions in it, because we organize the world with our brains and our nervous system into this little thing that we recognize very easily and we're comfortable with, but that doesn't really mean that that's it. That in fact, non-locality, if you want to call it that, is something that's real. And that idealized self that we have of ourself, in a sense, it already exists somewhere. And maybe that gets into multiple realities. I don't really know, because I'm no scientist. But I do feel that those kind of concepts that you have in particle physics, I think that those concepts teach us things about consciousness, and that we can learn much from that.
how does one worship these gods? You talked about there's a bloat, and you also talked about you could, climb a mountain and sacrifice your sweat or your work. I mean, how do you worship these gods, and do you worship all the gods, or do you choose one, or how does that work?
Well, in modern Asatru, as we practice it, the two main kinds of rituals are the blot and the sumbel. And I described the sumbel to you a while ago, where we share the horn and reach into the power of the past and bring the power of the past into the present so that we can utilize that power among us. And then the other one is the blot. And a blot to me is an exchange. It is a trade-off. There's always a gift for a gift. And the hofs, that portion of the Elder Edda that I mentioned earlier, in the hofs there's a verse about giving gifts. Friends should give each other gifts and go to see each other frequently. And that's kind of our approach with the gods. We think that the gods are our friends. Not like my drinking buddy is my friend, and not like the guy I work with is a friend, but, on a different kind of level, obviously. But we use that idea of giving a gift for a gift. Everything comes down to an exchange. We give our gifts to the gods, and the gods give their gifts to us. And the gifts that we give to the gods, usually it is mead. We have a horn, or sometimes we use two horns, one for the gods and one's for ourselves. Depends. We can do it either way. And we offer, the first thing I do, or that most of us do, is to pass the horn around. And each one of us who is participating puts their might, their main, their troth into the horn. You can think of that. I asked people to think of that like ki or chi or spiritual power or whatever you want to call it, to put that from your heart through your hand into the horn. And so we pass the horn around and each person touches it. And that is their gift. Their gift is that loyalty, that devotion, that troya. And then the gothi, the person who is doing the ceremony, then symbolically offers that to the god in question, gives that god our gifts. And sometimes, I pour that out onto the ground, and I say something like, "The mead falls to earth, our gifts rise to Odin." And then, if you're using a second horn, we take out another horn, and then I hold that one up, and I say, "Odin, we have given you our gifts. Now pour your gifts into this horn. Give us your gifts, which is wisdom and luck and well-being." And Odin pours his might into that horn. And then I take a twig of evergreen, and I dip it into the horn or into the bowl if it's in a bowl, and I'll walk around and I spray the mead onto the people in the circle, and I say, "I give to you the gifts of Odin. May he speak to you in your dreams. May he whisper in your ear. May he give you luck when you need it the most." And so things like that. It's all improvised as I do it, and then we finish up. We have given the god, whether it's Odin or a different one, our gift, and he then gives his gift, which is not a tangible gift. It's not like, a check shows up in the mail, or it's not like winning the lottery or something, but courage, honor, intelligence, insights, luck. Luck, I think, is a very magical thing. Maybe I was lucky that day in Africa, but that luck comes from somewhere. Luck is not just random. The universe is not as random as we think it is. And you can Typically we honor one god or goddess at a blot. I think there have been times that we offered just to the gods and the goddesses generally, but usually it's to a particular god or goddess that we focus on at a time. So that's a blot. A blot is a gift for a gift, whereas the symbol is taking the power from the past, from the well of Earth, the well of Weird, and distributing it among us so that we can have that power and access that power, that strength, and that virtue today. Which in a way it goes back to that non-locality thing, the idea that we can reach back into time, that there is a storehouse of knowledge and experience somewhere that we draw upon.
Does someone sacrifice meat? From an animal, flesh, or an animal? Does someone kill a goat or something like that?
That's a very rare thing. I've never participated in that personally. One could do that. I think the important thing is that if you eat meat, then killing an animal for meat should not be a big thing. We would never kill an animal painfully. We would, if we did that, we would honor that animal, and we would appreciate its life, and we would end that life in as a painless way as possible, and then we would consume the meat ourselves and share some with the gods. It would be the idea of sharing that life force with the gods, and then that puts an obligation on us to use that might in a way that is good and constructive and purposeful, rather than, we would never, ever, inflict pain for the purpose of inflicting pain. I like animals more than I like some people.
Yeah.
In Christianity, there are these different concepts. There's this concept of communion. There's this concept of confession, at least in some Christian circles. And there is a concept of prayer. So do you have anything in Asatru that is somewhat similar to those three concepts from Christianity?
Well, somewhat. I guess you could say that a blot is kind of like communion. We're not eating the body of the God. I used to be a Catholic, so that was kind of a really big thing with us. And so it's kind of parallel in some ways. Confession, I don't think we do much confessing. It's not that we think we're perfect, and it's not that we don't want to become better. We certainly do. But there's something about the way confession is done in Christianity that I was never comfortable with. It's like you're submitting. You're on your knees. You're just basically saying, God, I'm no good. I'm really horrible. Please don't squash me like a bug. And I don't like that. I don't do that before a human being, and I don't want to do that before my gods. Now, there are reports in historical times of people doing that, of being on their knees to our gods, or of prostrating themselves and so forth. But I can't do that. I can't do that. Odin has my life if he wants it. I have sworn loyalty and bravery. I've sworn, if need be, to give my life. So he's got that if he wants it. And therefore, I don't feel an obligation to get on my knees. It's not that I don't respect him. I absolutely respect Odin and all the holy powers. But I don't feel a need to grovel before them. I think that we are more than that. We share the essence of the gods within us. And there's no need for us to do that. That's my personal take on it. A lot of people would disagree. A lot of scholars would disagree, but hey, that's what scholars do. Let's see. It was communion, there was confession, and what was the other thing? Prayer.
Prayer.
Yes, we have prayers. In fact, I wrote a book of prayers. We talk to the gods, which is what I consider a prayer to be. we talk to the gods, and we can ask for things, and we can just give them our honor and praise. And I wrote a small book of prayers that calls upon the gods for many things, usually for the well-being of our folk. Again, if I'd been thinking, I would have one sitting here and I would read you one, but I didn't do that. My bad.
What is that book called?
A Book of Uncommon Prayer. I think in England there's the Book of Common Prayer. Well, we think ours is the Book of Uncommon Prayer. I've got a copy of that. Get a hold of me if you'd like, and we can get you copies of that or whatever. But it's just our way of talking to the gods. We don't bow our head when we do it. We don't get down on our knees. We stand before our gods like free men and women. The idea, I'm told, I don't know if this is true, but I'm told the whole idea of putting your hands together in prayer is because it was easier to put the rope or the chains. It symbolizes your servitude to God. And that's not the relationship we have with our gods, so I don't feel a need to do that.
Okay. What about a lot of these social issues? We talked about behavior earlier, about the 9 values, but how about things like sexuality, homosexuality, marriage, and family, and divorce, and abortion, and all these postmodern social values that have come into our society, and in my opinion hurt it. But how should an Asatru behave in terms of marriage and sexuality and stuff like that?
Well, from what you've told me and from the notes you gave me, before we started the other day, we are absolutely in agreement that is degeneracy. It is degeneracy. It is low behavior. It is behavior that we all need to get over if we are to continue with a culture and a civilization that is worth saving. The postmodernism is an evil construct, and it needs to be smashed. We need to replace it. Of course, I mean that in a nonviolent way. For all the people who are going to, want to get me arrested for having said it must be smashed. But it must be smashed. It must be destroyed. We must go beyond that. We must return to the values that are within us, that are the deepest elements of our culture and our civilization. These didn't come out of nowhere. They came out of our very essence, out of our very being. When we participate in the degeneracy of the society around us, we pull ourselves down. We pull our neighbors down. We pull all of our people down. We pull everyone who lives in the country, regardless of their racial background or their heritage. We pull everybody down with this. And no, we've got to go back to ways of honor and decency and discipline. I don't think that means we have to be prudish or anything like that. But we have to behave in ways that promote good individual behavior and the existence of healthy, stable families and society.
Yeah, because most of the gods had like a sort of spouse and children. But some of them did have sex with like giants and had like offspring outside of
Yeah, I hear that. I know that's part of the literature, but we have to look, I think, at the codes by which our people lived in real life, and that's not the sort of behavior that we indulged in as a civilization, as a culture, and I think that the traditionalism was with a capital T, that kind of a philosophy that we see some emergence of on the right is one actually that I mostly agree with. The only part I don't agree with is the actual Christianity, but I look at the values that many good Christians use, and those are good values because they are traditional, because they are important to the family, and they're important for our honest dealings with each other. I think this is not just Christianity, this is just common sense, and that our own ancestors who had nothing to do with Christianity understood the common sense of using those particular approaches to social life and to family life and to the world around us. So my Catholic mother and father would be happy to know that that I'm still saying good things about Christians.
Yeah. So in Christianity, in some religions, you are supposed to spread the religion and not tolerate that other people don't have your religion. I think that's the case in, as far as I understand it, in Christianity and in Islam. So how is the Asatru relation to this question? Are you supposed to be neutral towards other religions? Are you supposed to not have any contact with them? Or are you supposed to try to convert them or spread the message to maybe like, go door to door like some Mormons or whatever? Or how does that work?
Yeah. Well, yes. There are memes out there. There's memes out there with a raven on it. Have you heard the word of Odin today? Things like that. And no, we don't really do that. I kind of understand why Christians do that because that's what their religion tells them to do. And so, do you have Jehovah's Witnesses over there? Yeah, and they go door to door.
I actually live like 300 yards from a Jehovah's Witness church, so they are like a couple times a year they are over and knock on my door.
Yes, that's exactly the way it is here. I live out in the countryside, and they have to drive some ways to get out here, and they have to drive up a narrow road up a mountain, and they come up here, and here's my house, and it happens, like you say, about twice a year, and they're always very nicely dressed, and usually it's families. There'll be men and women typically, and maybe some younger children, and they're very nicely dressed and they're very polite, and I'll be honest with you. I used to enjoy giving them a hard time. And when I was young and kind of stupid, me and my buddies, we would say stupid things to them or tell them we were Satanists or, answer the door with no clothes on or, stupid stuff. But I look back on it now, and although our theology is 180 degrees from theirs, I understand now how much courage it takes to go door to door when you're going to get the door slammed in your face half the time, and people are going to play stupid jokes on you. And I'm kind to them now. I say, I have my own beliefs and they're very different from yours. But I know it, I appreciate the courage that you have, and I hope that people treat you nicely today. And they always like that. But, I feel no need. I would love to bring everyone of our folk back to their traditional ways. And for those of us who are entirely or principally Germanic, that would be Odin or Woden or Wotan and the other gods and goddesses. For those of our brothers and sisters who are Celts, they need to find that way. And I don't really know a good revival of Celtic religion that I trust these days. And our Slav brothers and sisters, I'm so glad we never went to war with the Russians. There's so many good Russian people. I hate communism. I detest communism. I'll go anywhere, any day to fight communists. But the Russian people are not bad people. And their old ways are much like ours. And they need to go that way. People need to seek out their blood religion. If the person is of our blood, our heritage, our ancestry, I would gladly love to bring them into Asatru. But even if they remain Christians, I still have a certain obligation to them. I still have blood loyalty to them. Their ancestors were my ancestors, and we are one folk, one great, I guess you could say, mega folk with little folkdoms inside it. But ultimately, we are of the same blood and bone, and whatever faith they follow. I wish they were us. I wish they would go to their native ways, but I won't make them enemies just because they're Christians. I mean, my mother and father were Christians. Everyone I loved when I was growing up as a child was a Christian. And some of them absolutely have the same values we do, except they don't get the religious thing. So, yes, I want to spread our religion. I think Asatru, or Wodanism, or Wotanism, or whatever you want to call it, and all of our associated European ethnic religions, I feel that these are important. I feel they have much to offer us. I feel that the salvation of our people ultimately depends upon calling upon those powers. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go door to door knocking on doors and bothering people and such.
Do you think more and more of our people is returning to the old ways?
Yes. I have no numbers. I don't think anybody has collected those numbers. But just to give an idea, when I wanted to wear a Thor's hammer, I couldn't find one anywhere. And I found the April 1970 issue of National Geographic. And there was a photograph of one in there from a museum. And I had to take it down to a local jeweler and say, make me one of these. And that's the one I wore when I was a college student and when I went into the Army. I lost that one during the water training exercise in Ranger School. But I immediately got another one, and I've worn a hammer since. Now, for the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years, nobody asked me what that was. Nobody said, hey, that's a cool Mjolnir, man, or look, a Thor's hammer, that's great. Nobody said that. And then, a few years ago, it started. And at first, it was like a person a year. And then it was like, oh, maybe several people in a year. And it was, I wish that I had kept notes. I would make a graph. And it would be one of those graphs, the curve that begins very, very, very modestly and then starts going exponential. To tell you about how it is sometimes now, this doesn't happen all the time, but I had 3 days, I don't know, a number of months ago, 6 months ago, let's say 8, 10 months ago. I went down to a little town, couple of hours drive from here, to do a wedding. So my wife, Sheila, and we check into the motel, and I walk out of the room to go and get some things from the car. And I'm walking across the parking lot, and I see a big, brawny guy walking towards me. And he says, hey, brother, I didn't know there was any more of us around here. And sure enough, it's this big, muscular guy, and he's wearing a hammer. And it turns out that he runs a small company that trims vegetation, like off around utility lines and so forth, for fire prevention. And he has like 10 guys in his crew, and they all wear hammers, and they're all of our folk, and they all honor the old gods. And that's astounding. So then the next day I went and did I say wedding? It was a funeral, actually. Yeah, how could I make that mistake? Well, it's all a change. And then go back to the hotel room, get up the next morning, and we're going to leave. So my wife and I go down, and here in motels and stuff here in the States, there's, you'll have your motel, and they'll have a little room with coffee and donuts, and, usually not very good coffee and usually not very good donuts or whatever, modest breakfast or whatever. And so we're sitting there, and it's kind of crowded, and we're drinking our coffee, and in walks a couple, my age or older, our age at least, and there's not a lot of places to sit, and so we say, please, have a seat with us. And they accept, And as the gentleman walks over and he's got his coffee and he looks down at us and he says, "Nice hammers." And this is an older guy. He's not a younger guy. And then he reaches inside his shirt and pulls out one and he says, "I've worn this since I was a young man. And I've always looked forward to the day that somebody would revive the old religion." And so I said to him, "Well, your wish came true." And we talked. And then, so we get in the car and we're going to drive home. And we're going to, okay, so there's outside Sacramento, there's a little place that was having a meetup, in a German restaurant. So we go up there and there was a couple of tables of our guys, mostly people I didn't know, new people to all of this. And we have a meal, we have a beer, and the waiter is very busy. So we hand the waiter a camera, it was a phone, and say, "Would you take a picture of us?" And so he stands down at the end of the table and he holds his arms up, and I look at his arm and he's got the elder Futhark carved on the inside of his arm. And I say, "We've got to talk." All of this in the space of 48 hours or less. Now I tried to estimate the odds of this being a coincidence. And I just said, what are the chances that I would meet that person in the parking lot? 1 in 1,000? What's the chances of meeting the people in the coffee place? I gave it sort of an arbitrary value that I thought was reasonable, and I multiplied it out. There was about 1 chance in 1 billion that sequence of events would happen over those 36 hours. So the curve is up. Now, every day isn't like that, but there are more and more and more of us. It's not like it was when I thought I was the only human being on the planet that followed Odin. And of course there were others, but no, it's changing and it's wonderful. The curve is up. We must accelerate that curve, not just for Germanic religion. That, yes, for sure. There needs to be more people following the one-eyed god and the god of the hammer and lovely Freya and so forth. But to awaken our folk more generally. Carl Jung's essay on Wotan is very important to us in that regard. Now, my understanding is that he considered the gods to be merely archetypes. But then there's a story about that Miguel Serrano says that with his last visit with Jung said, I used to think the gods were just archetypes, but now I think there's more to it than that. Now, I don't know that that story is true, but the fact remains, whether you think of the gods as archetypes or as symbols or as whatever, or whether, like me, you believe there's much more to it than that, we must produce an awakening of our old culture, of our old values, and you wouldn't have to be a follower of the gods to participate in that. The thing is to understand that our people, our folk, our race is endangered, and we must protect it. We must rise up. We must return to the values, the principles, the ways, the devotion, the courage, the love, the strength that we have within us. And whether you formally change your religion or not, to me, whatever, I would love to see more of us. But I'll stand with anyone who stands with our people. I'll stand with anyone who stands with our folk, because the existence of my people is not negotiable.
Where do we see the future of Asatru?
Well, like I say, the curve is up. I think that it will grow stronger. I think that it will grow more important. I think that sometime in the very near future, things are so bad here in the States, and I know things are bad over there too. As things get worse, Asatru in all its different variations and forms will strengthen. I think that I can see Asatru / Wodanism, Wotanism, whatever you want to call Fortru, Fornseed, whatever it is. I think that we will see this playing an important role in the future, that it can be a rallying cry for all of us, regardless of specific religious belief, to as a social movement or a political movement, to manifest in things that will be the salvation of our people. We all know that we can't go on like this. We can't go on like this in America. We can't go on with the left essentially using a double standard in terms of fairness and everything else to marginalize the people who founded this country. And I know your situation over there, it's a touchy one. I'm sure you have to be careful what you say about that. But the fact remains, it can't go on. I can say it. I can sometimes say things that you guys can't say publicly over there. But, just in my opinion, that's a problem that has to be fixed. The current situation, the status quo, is not acceptable on either one of our continents. We must save our people. For the sake of all those generations that went before us, the millennia of sacrifices, of efforts, of struggle, of those who gave us life, and the promise of life that we owe to our descendants yet unborn. And Asatru, for true, our old ways, shall we say, have a role to play in that. And I intend to do my very best to see that we carry out our responsibilities. Oh, you got me on my soapbox. Now I'm talking like a preacher.
Yeah, well, I guess you are.
I forgot I am a preacher. Anyway. Yeah.
Talking about preachers, so do you have like priests that you educate within Asa Folk Assembly?
Yes, we do. Yeah, our word for a female clergy person is a githya, and the males that do that role are gothis, and we put them through a training course that typically, well, since I founded the thing, I didn't really have to go through the course myself, but the way it's set up now, I think the course lasts something like 6 months. My wife went through that course. And it's tough. It's tough. It is not a walkthrough. It is not here, fill out the blanks and answer the multiple choice questions. No, it's much more introspective than that. They have to read stacks of books, and then they have to comment on them and compare them and talk about how that would relate to their practice in serving the people. And of course, they're authorized to perform marriages and funerals and our equivalents of baptism and so forth and so forth.
Could you talk about these 3 ceremonies or events? Like, how does a funeral go, and how does a marriage work, and how does a baptism, or your version of a baptism, how does these ceremonies perform?
There is some latitude in there. They don't have to all look the same. There's not like one book that it all comes out of. And often the Gothi or Githya will write a particular ritual for the people who are involved. Like for a wedding ceremony, typically the person who is doing the ceremony will call upon obviously the ancestors. They will call upon typically Odin and Frigga, Frey and Freya, so that you've got both the man and the woman involved there. They will talk about their commitment to each other. They will swear an oath to each other, typically on a ring. They will be, as in almost all of our rituals, there'll be a horn of mead, and they'll typically share that. Typically, the man and the woman exchange gifts. The man often gives a weapon, a knife, a sword. No reason you couldn't give a firearms, but that's not traditional. The principle is the same, and that's significant. And I don't remember quite what I said. He is given that. He is given that by the woman, and that symbolizes his duty to protect the household and the family. And then he gives to her the keys of the house to represent her domestic authority. The general breakdown is that if it happens in the house, it's her word. It's pretty much what she wants. And, she's in charge of the house, domestic affairs. Protection of the family, that is principally his role. And it's not that they can't do the other role. I mean, the woman could defend the house bravely if she had the weapon, or if the situation demanded, and the man certainly could, do things around the house. But the general breakdown is domestic and defense. And there's that all that is symbolized. And that's sort of the basic of the wedding ceremony. Funerals. Well, as you might imagine, cremation is popular with us. We don't do that on a big fire outside, while we're roasting hot dogs or something. And we don't do that with, the sacrificing of virgins and chickens, or, we don't try to recreate, something out of the Viking Age. And there's some very good accounts, particularly, from the Vikings along the Volga. Ibn Fadlan's description of a funeral is something you always find quoted. But cremation is very popular. Being buried in the earth, with friends around. Grave goods are sometimes given, typically a weapon, perhaps keys, whatever it might be appropriate. I don't know, not a lot to say about that, really. It'd be very nice. I would very much like to be buried, in a mound. Typically we don't do mounds because that's a lot of earth to move, but there'll be a memorial stone, and there'll be, the ashes or the body, in the earth. And so we are actually constructing what is the first, at least in America, the first cemetery for Asatru. I know that there is one in Denmark too. We visited that once, and it was very impressive. And ours is something we're still putting together. Sheila and I were out at the hof yesterday, and they were laying out the boundaries of it. They had their string out, and they were measuring off distances and so forth. And we've got a local man who does gravestones, and so that's very nice. We'll use appropriate runes for birth and for death, which is European custom in a number of cases. And it'll all be done very respectfully and very, I think, very, very satisfactory.
So the people who have been buried already, where are they buried? I mean, you can't. It's illegal to. Do they have to be buried some specific place? Or could you just go into the forest and bury someone?
Well, it would have to be on someone's land. You can't just, go out in a park somewhere and do it. But sometimes our people are buried in ordinary cemeteries. One outstanding man that I know, who is a kinsman of mine, guy named Joost Turner. His tombstone is very remarkable. And one side of it, he was. It's a long story. I'll try to make short. He was devoted to Wotan, but he was also very aware of yoga as an Aryan tool for self-development. And so he practiced Kriya Yoga as well. And so his tombstone has a mantra on one side, and on the other side there's this very large Thor's hammer carved into the rock, and the words say, "Do right and fear no one." So there's not one standard form that has to be followed, but we try to follow some of the basic principles at least. But it's getting more and more systematized now that we have our own land and our own place that we can put this in.
you also talked about some sort of baptism or something like that.
Well, yes, and it's interesting because it parallels the Christian one to some extent, and that's not because we copied it. I think that it's probably just so basic that it's, or maybe they got it from us, who knows. But it's called, I've heard it called both Vatna Ausi and Ausi Vatna. But basically it involves a sprinkling of water. It involves invoking the Norns. The Norns are pictured as being female entities. I guess you could call them like goddesses or minor goddesses. They're the big three Norns are Urð, Verdandi, and Skuld. And those three translate from the Norse roughly as Urð, that which has become. We talked about that earlier in the sense of being the past, right? We just say it is that which has become. Doesn't mean it went away. It just means that it has become. And then there's Verdandi is that which is becoming. And then there is Skuld, that which should become. And when I say should, I mean not in a moral sense, like this should happen. We want this to happen. It's more like, given the current circumstances, this will be what happens. Again, it's very cause and effect. It's not predetermined by any means. It's all cause and effect. You get the luck you make. And they sort of look over those three areas of time, so to speak. But there are apparently, according to the lore, minor beings that are smaller Norns that give luck and so forth. And so at birth, we want to give good luck, quotation marks, to that child. We want that child to have good Norns, which would probably manifest by being in good health and to give that baby a good start in life. So there is a sprinkling of water, and it looks, or it can look, kind of like the Christian rite of baptism. We typically sprinkle water or mead in our rituals off of an evergreen sprig because, that seems to have been much more typical in the old days. So we give them good luck. The way we do it these days, our format, at least in the AFA, involves the night before, the person, the Gothi who will be performing the ceremony, draws 3 runes out of the bag. One of those represents Urð, and another one, Verdandi, and then the third one that he draws, he represents Skuld, so that you have the 3 Norns represented there. And he will read those runes accordingly to speak about, that child and its promise, and to wish it, good luck in the future, that kind of a thing. So you have the Norns invoked, you have the runes read, you have a sprinkling with mead, you have the child being formally accepted into the community and brought into the community, and with the wishes that, for when you're old enough, you will stand in the circle with us, and you will be with us, we hope, through a long and happy and productive life as a member of our community.
Yeah. I saw that you had built 2, what do you call them, hofs? It's like buildings. What is the significance of these buildings?
Well, they serve many functions. They are our equivalent of the temples of the old days. We use them as places where we do our rituals, as where we eat together, where we come together to do everything we do. The first one we got in the little town of Brownsville here in Northern California. We've had that one for several years now. As soon as we saw it, we knew it was the place that we wanted. It had this large, older building that had been used in the community for many community functions since 1938, I think. So it's an older building, but it had like 4,000 square feet of area just in the meeting area. And then it had a kitchen, and it had all the things we needed. And it also had, a considerable amount of land outside it so that we could have an outdoor ritual place. And we knew it was the place we wanted because, first of all, the layout was just right, but also there was a huge stone about 3 or 4 feet high and roughly rectangular, just sitting out there in between 2 trees. And I thought this is the perfect place to do blot, to use that as our hög, our altar. And so we raised the money for that, and we moved into it. And we now have a very nice outdoor ritual area there. There's a fire, and then around it is there are representations of the gods at, say, it's probably about 40 feet diameter, something like that, and with that large stone at one end. And it's I was out there yesterday. It's a wonderful place. That's the place that we're putting in the burial grounds as well. And then just a few months ago, the AFA purchased land over in a different part of the country entirely, way over on the East Coast area, and we bought an old church that had been used by the Christians, and it has a very nice social hall next to it, where we can do social events and so forth. And there's even a grave there, someone's grave, which of course that person was a Christian. And we will honor that grave. We will respect that. But that's one that's coming online over there. I think you're going to see some more coming. It won't be a long time. It won't be 5 years or 4 years before you see more of them. It's looking really good for some more in the short term. But it all depends upon, funds. It all depends upon the market at any given time, what kind of places are available. And it depends on where in the country do we need it the most. So, we're building these around the country. These are pretty much first accomplishments. The Icelanders have been talking about theirs for years. Well, we had ours long before they got theirs. But of course, they're starting from scratch. But I guess they'll probably get some money from the government because that seems to be the way it works in Europe. But we raised every penny of it ourselves.
Mm. I saw on your website that you had this charity thing on a funding concerning the white people in South Africa, or the poor people in South Africa, and how they are treated horribly by their new masters. Could you talk about that activity?
Yes. Yes, I'd be glad to talk about that. It's something that's very important to me. I don't know. I spent some time in South Africa shortly before Mandela took over. I went down there to, see what could be done and to coordinate with some people. And I also spent some time up on the Angolan border. But South Africa has always been an issue with me, as it is with others in the AFA, because we see that as sort of a white tribe that needs to be protected. And we all know that they are endangered and that they're discriminated against and that they are persecuted and that they're murdered by criminals with very little issue. The government doesn't really care about the white people. So the way things are now is that the black South Africans who are poor get support from the government. The government comes in and gives them food and so forth and so forth. But there are many poor whites who are living in squatters camps, just living in shacks and with little or nothing in the way of food or any sort of comforts at all. And so the blacks are getting all the food that comes in. Whites can be there and be hungry and they get turned away, and they never go into the white settlement camps and do anything for them. Our people were starving and they have no jobs in so many cases. Almost, all of those who are in the camps have nothing. So we decided that it was time to do something about that. And we do have a local, I say a local, it's actually a national group in South Africa. We have, as you know, congregations, which we call kindreds. We have congregations all around the world, and we have one in South Africa that was very involved in this issue. And so they personally deliver food to the poor whites in South Africa. And we raise the money for that and make that happen.
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. It's really awful. Sigtyr, do you have any? I think I've asked all of the things I wanted to ask. So, Sigtyr, do you have anything?
No, not really. I think we have been around the topic.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I have enjoyed my times in Scandinavia, and in Denmark in particular. There are some very fine folks, and I think y'all know a few of them, who took my wife and I around, and a couple of our other friends took us all over the place, and we appreciated it so much. Oh, it was a full day every day. We would hit stone circles, Viking burials, old barrows out in the middle of wheat fields that that tourists don't even know exist, and even locals don't know about hardly. One very interesting lady who is very familiar with all those places and who took us around. And we had a great time. We were well received. And I just want to say that we're very, very grateful to the Danish people in particular for giving us such hospitality and good times. We made many fine friends. Most of whom probably don't want their names announced, but they're dear to our hearts, and you're all dear to our hearts. We are blood. We stand with you, and as time goes by and things happen, I think you can depend upon us for any help that we can possibly offer.
Yeah. I was in America about 2 years ago, and I spent some time with white people originally they were from Germany and Austria and Italy and Ireland, but they felt like my kind of people. They felt like family, even though they lived in America and were 100 years or 200 years removed from Europe. So I think there's a lot of similarities when you meet other so-called white people around the world.
Like I said to you before we started recording, blood is thicker than water. The waters of the Atlantic are not enough to keep us apart. We are tied together by blood and by faith, by all the things that really matter. And we're not identical. Our different cultures, there's some differences, and we practice the old religion differently, and some of us don't practice the old religion at all, but that doesn't change the fact that we are blood kin, that we must stand with each other, that we must share in each other's problems, there's a line out of the Hofs about visiting your friends often. So if you ever get over to California, be sure you come by.
Sure.
So it's a long ways from Denmark, yeah. I know.
It is.
Yeah, we'll definitely.
That would be awesome. We'll treat you well.
Thank you. So I just want to thank you for your time. It's been over 3 hours, yeah. So we greatly appreciate you spending your precious free time with us, and we're very grateful for you for being so open about your knowledge.
Anyone who's listening to this, feel free to find the Asatru Folk Assembly on Facebook and other social media. Also, as I mentioned, the Votan Network, which is my particular project. There is a one site for the Hof, Odin's Hof, and so we have a lot of presence still. We haven't all been kicked off Facebook, just bad boys like me. But so please check us out, say hello, and if you're in the area, drop by.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.